started Benj, Justin, and I, we always knew that we wanted to tell a story that was about right now, which was 6 years ago, but still right now, and the world that we all were living in. And so that world was obviously, and even more so now, a world of social media and a world of gadgets and devices and screens. So the only way to really tell that story authentically, I think, was to somehow find a way to incorporate all of that into the narrative. So we were always very conscious of not wanting to be self-conscious about the use of technology. Like, we never wanted it to feel like a musical about technology, but we wanted to be honest about our experiences and how ubiquitous all of this is. So
I think Peter wants to talk about incorporating it into the design.
There you go.
So my experience was largely that these guys wrote for like 6 years, and then they came and they threw me under the bus and said, "Okay, great, this is the idea. How do you make it do this on stage?" But I think that by and large, like, that question of authenticity, like, how do we tell this story that feels like all of our experiences of social media and our life as it exists with this community, this digital community that's all around us. And how do we tell that story? We need to be honest about it, but there's also like a second component of that, which is we also have to keep it being theatrical. Like, we can't just put those exact things on stage. We need to somehow take the same way that, like, in the theater, we're taking sort of the mundane bits of our everyday life and making them poetry. We have to do that with the digital media as well. We have to take social media and all the graphics and the visuals and that thing that we're constantly looking at on our phones and make it into poetry. And that was like the real challenge, is not to just put it on stage.
And maybe you and Michael can chat a little bit about kind of maybe the iterative process that you went, right? Because very early on, there were some things that were impressionistic, and then, you know, there's a balance between getting completely authentic and not just thinking we're all going to be looking at our screens. How did you balance that in the storytelling?
Hey everybody. There used to be a different song at the end of Act 1, which was called A Part of Me. It's been replaced by the incredible You Will Be Found. But both of the songs were similar in that they were about the characters in the play being overwhelmed by the virtual world. And I think that song, even the earlier version of that song, very much inspired and in fact, in a lot of ways, dictated what the design would be, both the projection design and also the set design. You know, the opportunity for the characters to be completely absorbed, engulfed, overwhelmed, and simultaneously comforted and also assaulted by that world. So I think it really did come out of the really, really, really excellent writing, the way in which we would physically depict that. And then, of course, Peter went about, you know, the extraordinarily exacting process of finding all of the right imagery. But I think that notion of how that world would feel in our world was something that happened very early on in how we started thinking about the play.
So by the way, get questions ready, because we're going to be going out into the audience shortly. You have an opportunity. Hello!
Yay, Mom!
Yay!
The other thing I just wanted to throw in,
yeah,
because this is something that all of us up here kind of know and forget about, sometimes take for granted, is, you know, Stephen said like 6 years ago when they started writing, or 4 years ago when Michael started, 4 years ago when Michael started directing like workshops with actors of this, or 2 years ago now when we started working on the first production of this. This is the third time we put the show on stage. And so that there's this sort of very intensive and iterative is exactly the word. Even on a single version, we might sit in the theater for 2 to 3 weeks building the production, and then 4 or 5 more weeks watching the show every night, and then rehearsing it the following afternoon and making changes, so that it's a very iterative process, right? We're constantly touching this, and then we go away after the pre-Broadway production, work for, you know, various amounts of time without being on stage, and then come back and do it again. So that it's a lot of layering and evolution of the design, the writing, everything is sort of multiple layers and the long-term editing process.
Yeah, so I guess this is for the cast, so anybody can kind of talk a little bit about.
Will Roland.
There you go.
I love good talk.
How about you ask the question and answer it too?
What's the question?
I don't know. Okay.
How do we go on this emotional journey every night?
Yes, that's what people want to know. No, so, and honestly, you helped kind of kick off the social media campaign, Will Be Found, right? So a lot of what you saw tonight was actual folks kind of contributing across social channels to feel a part of that, and would love, obviously, for Will and everybody to talk a little bit about kind of some of the stories that you had. I'm sure you have a lot of fans that reach out to you that kind of feel that way and feel that they actually do connect and they do belong. So I think it would be really great to talk a little bit about some of that outreach.
You get a lot of this.
Yeah, well, as I think as the moms, we get a lot of the tweens, teens, and young 20s saying, I am Evan Hansen or I am Connor, and they always want a hug. And it's really, really rewarding to be able to tell this story and give them some hope that life is going to be okay. What was the question?
Well, no, about people reaching out to you like that and the stories.
And a lot of moms, too, which is pretty great. A lot of parents, especially mothers, who feel like they've just completely fucked up their kids' lives. It's really beautiful that they can, that these guys wrote this message of forgiveness, and I feel it every night, and I try to give it every night, for my own parents and my own, so it's really beautiful. A lot of mothers, a lot of mothers.
How about you guys down over here? Folks reaching out.
I think what's really cool about the show is that it makes people talk about things that they wouldn't talk about, and it kind of opens up these conversations that are really important to have. And I have a lot of people who have said things that are incredibly powerful that this show has, made them want to continue to live, as dramatic as that. And also a lot of people who say, you know what, your relationship with your brother I had a very similar relationship with my brother, and I can now reconcile that. And so even if, the conversations aren't possible for people, they are able to tell me, or other people in the cast I know, that they are now continuing to reconcile this, which is really cool. And I think that that's what's so special about this show, is that it forces people to, think about things that, might keep you up at night.
I got a text today from someone.
Take this mic. There you go. No one can hear you.
Yeah, I got a text today from someone. I'm not going to, obviously not name any names. A psychologist has said that one of her patients, teenage girl, came to see the show last weekend, and hyperbole aside, she said, I'm paraphrasing, this show was able to do in one night what I've been trying to do for the last 4 years. So I mean, there's tangible evidence that this is happening and helping people. And I'm just so glad you guys are good.
Well, but I will also say that this cast has been part of this show. Every single person up here has been part of this show for a long time. Most for many, many years, and they've been doing these parts for many, many years. So they have inhabited these roles in such a powerful way, and I think that has huge amounts to do with the way people connecting the show, just the heart and the courage with which all of these actors play these parts every night is pretty remarkable.
Just also to give credit to Steven, I think something that Justin and I are so inspired by is that he's written all these characters to all be so imperfect. And what Rachel said about forgiveness, it's like when you are looking at every single person on stage, everyone is broken in some way, everyone is at fault in some way. There's no one who is completely doing the...
I disagree.
Come on now, JLT. No, but I think that when you watch that, that you are forced to have empathy for people who you understand. Hopefully the way that it's written, and this is so led by Steven, is that you're forced to have empathy and understand why people are making the decisions that they're making, even though they're not always what we deem to be good or rational or nice. And seeing a whole group, an entire company of imperfect people making decisions that you understand forces you to, take someone else's perspective and empathize with them. And I think it forces empathy, which is, I think we would all agree, a very vital thing that we all are craving now, and hope that other people, value. And that's something that I love about going to the theater, and something that everyone in this casting views in their character as well.
Go theater nerds, right? Questions? Anybody? No? No surprise. Oh, here we go. Oh, wow, look at that. Yes.
So how do you go through the emotional?
The question is, how do you go through the emotional roller coaster?
Will Roland?
It's not easy. No, I think that one of the things that, as someone who's not, sort of exuding a lot of bodily fluids on the stage each night, the way that some of my colleagues are, I think that what you have up here is, first of all, a lot of people who have been sitting with these characters for a long time, and who sort of know being on this stage and in this show as kind of second nature. And so in terms of preparation, I think at this point it's very easy for all of us to sort of just kind of drop into it and let the material work on us, which is so strong. And as an actor, if you don't have good material, you have nothing. So I mean, we're very lucky to have what we have to work with. And then also we as human beings have quite a lot of fun together. We're definitely a big goofy family. And we like to laugh, and we like to joke around, and we like to, keep each other in high spirits off stage, because what happens on stage is so sensitive and so near the surface and heavy.
Yeah, Laura, you need to take over the Instagram account again real soon, because carving everybody's heads out and putting them onto like the Sound of Music pics is pretty classic. Michael, you've done a pretty good job too. I think when Benj and Justin won their Golden Globe. Yes! You folks did a pretty good comeback doing a, you tell the story.
What? I didn't do it. What, me?
Yeah. You had you did the Instagram where you ended up sending a note to somebody and then saying, it came out.
Oh, my wife, yes. Well, my wife sent me a text. Pass again, sorry guys, pass again, Paul, just O-N-E. And I said, someone's texting without their glasses again. And to which she replied, no, I was, what is it, voice command, something like that? See, that's a great story. It's a wonderful story. Nailing it. But, pass again, Paul. Okay. I'm done. I'm finished. Say something.
But it is good, it is, because you guys need to do that, right? You have to be able to kind of joke around and go with that. I think, Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, first, congrats, that was awesome.
I'll translate, congrats, that was awesome.
Everyone has been in a lot of productions. This seems like a very important show. Do you agree? How do you feel about kind of the show, both in terms of how kind of current it is and how timeless it is?
Yeah, did everybody hear that? We good?
I have a mic, so I'm going to talk.
Good. Yes. Go for it.
The reason I stuck with this show, and thank God that they still wanted me to stay with it, but for the last 3 years, is that it is such an important message, and it's universal. And I recently read a quote about that there is always a mom and a son issue, whether it's centuries ago or hundreds of years ago, or 2000 BC. There's always issues that are relatable to this world that we're living in, and we're living in a very contemporary world, and we tell that story, including the very contemporary character of social media, which has a great effect on our teens and 20s. And currently I'm addicted to Twitter. I was never on Twitter, and now I'm all of a sudden like glued to my screen because I like to tweet silly pictures of my pin girls. But it's an important message, and especially, as I said, as a mom, to be able to give that message to young people who don't have hope. Moving people in a way that musical theater is meant to do is what makes it worth it. And I'm proud to be a part of it.
I think, as actors who work in musical theater, the potential that this medium has finally, for me, been fully realized in this show. The excellent book married to these gorgeous songs and beautiful direction by Michael. I mean, the cast is off the charts. I think we all started feeling that really buzzy, excited feeling, because for me, I'm 47 years old and I have loved musical theater, but I haven't. Like, I've loved the potential of musical theater because music elevates us. It speaks from our souls, you know? It connects us in a way that's beyond words. And to have amazing words then to go along with it, and to have a real play to work with, it's just never all of those things at once. So I think all of us, when we first sat down and heard this and read this, we were like, oh my God, keep me on this project forever, because it's really rare. It's come to fruition, all of our dreams for the medium, you know?
And do you think and I guess this is, you know, Michael or Benj, Justin, whomever, do you think there's going to be more of this, you know, the show's been getting a lot of praise for pushing the boundaries on its use in social and digital, not only in terms of the production, but in the storytelling, and then of course across the way in which that story then is brought to the audience. Do you expect more? Can you see more of that coming? Or do you find that this is a singular moment in terms of because it's this show?
No, I think every show pushes the boundaries a little and pushes everything a little more forward. I think what's remarkable about this show is that, you know, there's a perfect integration between what is happening dramatically in the story and how social media is used theatrically. You know, you really have an inside and an outside. You have the perfect contents and then you have the perfect envelope. So, you know, I wish those future productions and future shows well, but, you know, this is singular of its moment, and then there'll be another spectacular show which will capture its moment very spectacularly too. We all hope, and I know there will be.
Yes, go for it. Hey.
Thank you guys for an amazing show. I have two questions. First, Ben, I feel like I need to know what your date, like how much water do you drink? Sleeping on the stage every night, and to everyone, I'm also curious, being in a show that shows how out of control social media can get, and how has that changed your personal use of some of the mediums?
Both great questions. As to the first, a lot of water. No, I think, you know, the blessing about having had over 3 years to develop this character and having been involved with the piece for so long is that I feel that I've had a lot of preparation time to sort of figure out how to recreate this story every night and how to physically do the role. And so I think that I have a lot of things in place in a physical, logistical way as far as voice lessons and dieting and sleep and water consumption and just things that can physically prepare for the role to be able to recreate it to my utmost ability every night. I think that the thing I'm still sort of figuring out, if you will, is we've never done it for this long, and so just sort of trying to figure out how to maintain that sort of level of emotional intensity and to give everybody the experience that I want everyone to really have, but saving some of myself for myself. So I think that the jury's still out on that one, but when it's a wonderful audience like you guys, it's much easier to do. And then as far as social media, it's definitely made me sort of realize that I don't have to have one attitude towards it. I think that it's good for a lot of things. When phones ring in the middle of the show, that's the worst part of social media. Oh God, that's the worst. I think that there's a wonderful community to be found with it. I think it's a beautiful place to share things that are happening in your life. I think it's a great way to connect with fans. As somebody who uses it as a professional tool, to feel like people can sort of have a window into what my life is and what sort of me as an entity, if you will. But I think that where the danger comes in and what the show's really helped me to try to avoid is looking for any sort of meaningful validation from social media, from sort of trying to glean self-worth from comments and likes and followers, and sort of comparing my life to other people's lives using social media, because I know that sort of the representation that I'm putting out, that everyone's putting out, is such a intense deviation from what's actually happening in people's lives. And so I think if you can keep it in perspective, it has the potential to be a wonderful thing, and the show's made me sort of not take it for granted, but also not put too much investment into it as far as my soul.
I'll say on the pro, so I'm not like a big social media person, but I think on the pro side, I think one thing that's interesting to mention is that when we started writing the show, I think we started writing a very different show than it ended up being. We started writing it as sort of, I think, a very jaded, sort of ironic view of public grief and how people, when something, a tragedy happens or when something happens in the news, how everyone wants to be part of that story. And I think we looked at it sort of almost in like a condemning way of our generation. I know that that's what we pitched a very dark version of this to Stephen when we first met. We were like, we're a disgusting generation of people who just like want to say that we knew someone who was part of a tragedy, or we knew someone in 9/11, or like all those kinds of things, because we did have those experiences. And I think what was a really valuable experience for us as the writers was, as we started to write the show and to explore the characters, and thankfully we went in this direction, was to really see the other side of the coin, and to really see, as much as it's very easy to view it that way, and there's a celebrity death, and we're all posting our stories of, this is my Robin Williams story, this is how I knew this person, and it feels very me. There is another side of it, and for us it was realizing that we needed to explore, like, even if there's questionable things about those actions, there's obviously a real deep need in people, and there's a need to be part of a community, and there's a need to be connected. And yes, you can take one view of it and say, everyone wants just to be part of this and associate with it. But you can also say, this is a chance for people to come together and to feel like they're healing, and feeling like you're coming together and being part of a community is not a bad thing. You know, is it done in questionable ways sometimes, or some ways that feel selfish? Yes, and I think the show looks at that as well. But I think it was an interesting lesson for us to learn as we started writing it, to sort of acknowledge that we couldn't just paint it as this sort of gross thing. And that's actually what, you talked about the two songs that were at the end of Act 1. The earlier song is called A Part of Me, and it was like meant very much to be like, this tragedy had a big effect on me. And that changed into this other song that was meant to be really actually about healing and about people coming together, because we couldn't really deny that that was a legitimate part of when something like this happens, what happens on social media, that people can connect who don't feel connected, who feel completely isolated. So I think it was an interesting lesson for us to learn, and thing for us to explore.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that a little bit too. When we would, Justin and I and the three of us with Stephen, we would kind of condemn looking at people who weren't involved in a tragedy. But what was really interesting is that when you dive deeper into these characters, and having even real life experiences, being at, you know, funerals of friends even, you see that there's actually a real need for people who are close to someone who has died to honor their memory. So when I would not know somebody who had passed away, I would look at their Facebook wall and I'd be like, who are you who you're posting your one moment in high school with this person? But when I've had friends who I am closer with, I went to a friend of mine's funeral who took his own life 7 months ago, and his dad at his funeral was like, please post pictures, please tell stories, please share everything that you can. And I think there's this real human need when you are close to someone who's passed away, that you want to feel like you have a community, you want to feel like people care, you want to feel like your kid is remembered. And not losing sight of that there really is another side of the coin, that you know, people, as Justin said, whether you're the Evan Hansen situation, that you want to feel a part of the community, or you're the parent, or you're the sibling, you want to feel like the people that you loved are remembered and cared about. So trying to strike a balance of understanding people's motivations for wanting to be a part of this in the social world was something that we really, we became a little less cynical and tried to understand the emotional reason behind doing that as well.
Oh, sadly, I got the Lance, quick, 2 seconds.
Was it always going to be a happy ending? Because you know, you said it started dark, and I did wonder, you know.
Yeah, I actually, even in the very beginning, it was always going to be a complicated ending. I think we knew that it couldn't be. We knew that we wanted to end it with some hope, but we didn't know how much. But yes, I mean, yeah. So that was always a balancing act. We knew we wanted Evan to be okay. We definitely wanted the Murphys to be okay and to feel like they had gained something and grown. But we weren't sure how much Evan, sort of how much he needed to be, not punished is the wrong word, but how much he had to atone for what he had done. And ultimately, I think we realized that in the course of the show, he does that himself. I mean, he kind of punishes himself, and he, by the time we get to him in the end, we want to feel like he has grown and he's become, he's grown up. He's no longer a little boy, and that he's going to be okay, and that through this experience, I think what we learned as we worked on it is that Evan figures out a way to save himself, ultimately, is really the story here. He creates a fiction that allows him to save his own life. And that became really powerful for us.
Well, that's great. I think that's actually all the time we have.
So please do join us at Marseille on 44th and 9th. The cast and crew are going to be there, so let's continue the conversation, and thank you so much.
Rob.